In 1925, Mahatma Gandhi wrote the following words: "I find a solace in the Bhagavad Gita that I miss even in the Sermon on the Mount. When disappointment stares me in the face, and all alone I see not one ray of light, I go back to the Bhagavad Gita. I find a verse here and a verse there, and I immediately begin to smile in the midst of overwhelming tragedies. And my life has been full of external tragedies, and if they have left no visible, no indelible scar on me, I owe it all to the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita." In this passage that I have just quoted to you, Mahatma Gandhi was referring to what is perhaps the most famous of all the spiritual classics of India, the Bhagavad Gita, or Bhagavad the Lord Gita Song, the Song of the Lord. It is spelled Bhagavad, Bhagavad, Gita, Gita, the Song of the Lord in this case being Sri Krishna, who in Hindu mythology is regarded as an incarnation, an embodiment, in the Sanskrit language, an avatar of Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, the personification of the ultimate reality underlying this universe. The Bhagavad Gita was probably compiled about the 5th century BC, and it forms a part of a great epic called the Mahabharata. It's attributed to a sage by the name of Vyasa, and contains a complete epitome of the whole central doctrine of Hinduism known as the Vedanta.
Well, good hello to you. You've reached the Al Newport Show. I'm your host, Alexander T. Newport, your philobabblist extraordinaire. Today's date is the 11th of May, 2019. That clip that we just heard, I'm not sure when it was recorded. As you know, there's hundreds of recordings of Alan Watts giving lectures that are on YouTube, and most of them don't have any information as to where and when the lecture was recorded. Nonetheless, that's Alan talking about the Bhagavad Gita, and I only recently discovered the Bhagavad Gita. I certainly have seen it mentioned in books numerous times over the past 40 years, but I just never, for some reason, I never gravitated to it. I never bothered to look into it. But for about the past year or so, I've been spamming this Q Patriot board at 8chan with memes about perfect eternal conscious energy. And most of the time I don't get any engagement, and sometimes I get accused of being a Kabbalist. So, something to do with the Kabbalah, some sort of Jewish book, Jewish text. But this one time, I don't know, a couple of months ago, someone replied to one of my perfect eternal conscious energy memes with this screenshot of basically the text, or a summary of the text of the Bhagavad Gita, and I was really tickled to see that it's basically, without using the words, Krishna is describing perfect eternal conscious energy, and basically describing this world as illusory. The Bhagavad Gita, and therefore Krishna within it, doesn't extrapolate from the definition of perfect eternal conscious energy. It doesn't go far enough. The Bhagavad Gita does not talk about how we are all perfectly equal and equally perfect, and there is no God or Lord or anything above us or below us. It's just perfect spirits that are perfectly equal and equally perfect to one another, who designed this particular physical world and scripted their roles within it. The Bhagavad Gita doesn't go that far. But nonetheless, in reading and rereading that part where Krishna is talking about perfect eternal conscious energy, which we'll get to here in a moment, it suddenly occurred to me that this is where Helen Schuckman got her idea for the summary of A Course in Miracles. In all my research over the years having to do with A Course in Miracles and Helen Schuckman herself, which included a biography on her, I only ever found one biography on her. Now, there might be another one or new ones available now, but I don't any longer, study or research A Course in Miracles or anything to do with it. But when I was studying it and researching Helen Schuckman herself, there was a biography called Absence from Felicity, which I no longer own. I thought I was being nice and kind to the world by donating it to the library, and a couple of weeks later, when I was on my way out of the library, I saw a little bunch of books for sale, and fuck, there was my book. There was fucking Absence from Felicity for like 50 cents. And I had paid like $20 or for something for it, because it wasn't a mass market book, it was rather sort of a niche published type of book. And but nonetheless, so yeah, I just because the summary of A Course in Miracles, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, herein lies the peace of God, that's it's offered to you as if that's the gist of the Course, and yet the Course itself, spends the majority of itself being anti-ego, saying things like, you're here as the result of an errant judgment, you should not be having this dream, this nightmare. It says that God weeps for his sons because they're having this nightmare, and yet other places it tells you God is completely at peace. It tells you that in the summary. God is completely at peace. Why is he at peace? Well, because nothing real can be threatened. Well, what could possibly be real then? And you have to conclude that that's life itself, that it's consciousness, that it's beings, it's entities, it's people, it's whoever the fucking Course is addressed to. And yet, like I said, in all my research, I never saw any mention that Helen Schuckman was even the least bit familiar with any aspects of the Hindu religion. Besides the Bhagavad Gita, which, like I said, seems to describe perfect eternal conscious energy, but doesn't go far enough in talking about it. But there's also other aspects of the Hindu religion that talk about this being a dream, and that nothing real is being threatened. It doesn't use that phrase, nothing real is being threatened, but that's the gist of it. And when I was researching and studying A Course in Miracles, came across various articles or opinions, talking about A Course in Miracles, and quite often they would refer to it as being Neoplatonic, but they never ever made any mention of fucking the Hindu religion or the Bhagavad Gita, which, there's this very, very, very strong parallel. Now, the thing is Helen Schuckman, was an associate professor of psychology at Columbia University. She was formerly a Catholic. I think she was like raised Catholic, but being an associate professor of psychology and thus a quote unquote kind of scientist or whatever, she was basically an atheist. So even when she was writing A Course in Miracles, she admittedly herself, she admits she didn't really believe what the hell she was writing, and yet where is it coming from? And there's interviews with her and so forth, and she doesn't make any mention, of studying religions or spirituality. So it's very peculiar. because this summary of hers in A Course in Miracles really mirrors the description within the Bhagavad Gita. I've got a little wiggly worm here by my side. Yep, we don't have a camera going, baby. We just have a microphone. That's right. My little cavapoo. My little rug. She doesn't shed any hair. Anyways, so yeah, after all these years, thanks to some anonymous dude or person at the Q Patriot 8chan Research Board who responded to one of my Perfect Eternal Conscious Energy memes with that little screenshot of the Bhagavad Gita. It's and then shortly thereafter, I found these clips of Alan talking about the Bhagavad Gita. And isn't that interesting that up until now, I had never run across clips of Alan talking about the Bhagavad Gita. So it's a very curious thing about timing. I'll talk a little bit more about timing later, but let's listen to the next clip.
It's a very fascinating and to us puzzling fact that Gandhi, preeminently the man of non-violence in modern times, was so devoted to this book. Because the scene with which the book opens is a battlefield, the field of Kuru, where a young prince by the name of Arjuna is riding in his chariot, and Sri Krishna, the incarnation of Vishnu, is his charioteer. As the opposing armies face each other, and the battle is about to begin, and Arjuna is faint in heart, oppressed with the senselessness of this struggle and of internecine warfare. And the Gita says in the first chapter, he was overcome with great compassion and uttered this in sadness. When I see my own people arrayed and eager for fight, O Krishna, my limbs quail, my mouth goes dry, my body shakes and my hair stands on end. And I see evil omens, O Krishna, nor do I foresee any good by slaying my own people in the fight. I do not long for victory, O Krishna, nor kingdom nor pleasures. Of what use is kingdom to us, O Krishna, or enjoyment, or even life? And having spoken thus on the field of battle, Arjuna sank down on the seat of his chariot, casting away his bow and arrow, his spirit overwhelmed by sorrow. And to this complaint his charioteer, the Lord Krishna, replies, Whence has come to thee this stain, this dejection of spirit in this hour of crisis? It is unknown to men of noble mind. Yield not to this unmanliness, O Arjuna, for it does not become thee. Cast off this petty faint-heartedness, and arise, O oppressor of the foes. And to give point to his words, Krishna goes on, Thou grievest for those for whom thou shouldst not grieve, and yet thou speakest words about wisdom. Wise men do not grieve for the dead, nor for the living. Never was there a time when I was not, nor thou, nor these lords of men, nor will there ever be a time hereafter when we shall cease to be. As the soul passes in this body through childhood, youth, and age, even so is its taking of another body. The sage is not perplexed by this. Heat and cold, pleasure and pain come and go, and do not last forever. These learn to endure. The man who is not troubled by these, O chief of men, who remains the same in pain and pleasure, who is wise, makes himself fit for eternal life. Of the non-existent, there is no coming to be. Of the existent, there is no ceasing to be. The conclusion about these two has been perceived by the seers of truth. Know thou that that by which all this is pervaded is indestructible. Of this immutable being no one can bring about the destruction. It is said that these bodies of the eternal embodied, which is indestructible and incomprehensible, come to an end. Therefore fight, O Arjuna. He who thinks that this slays, and he who thinks that this is slain, both of them fail to perceive the truth. This one neither slays nor is slain. He is never born, nor does he die at any time. Nor having come to be, does he again cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, permanent, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain.
So you can hear there, Krishna is talking to Arjuna. Arjuna's tripping out about the fucking war. He's, basically been raised in his life to be a warrior, but he's suddenly overcome with, misgivings, if you will, because the people that he's going to be fighting are, cousins and uncles and so forth. And so here's Krishna, man. Here's Krishna describing perfect eternal conscious energy. Now, I'm just putting it in my own words here, but I mean, he's basically telling them, hey, man, you, me, your cousins, your uncles, they're all actually perfect spirits. They're actually perfect eternal conscious energy. We actually, before the Big Bang, before this world appeared, we all planned and designed this life. We scripted it out as a big, beautiful, long, choreographed dance and drama and opera, a soap opera, a spiritual movie. And so you're not really killing, the spirit that is playing the part of your uncle or your cousin or whoever. That's what Krishna's saying, man. That's exactly what fucking Krishna's saying. That's what you can extrapolate further from it anyways. And so that's trippy. Using perfect eternal conscious energy to convince this guy that he's gotta go to war. He's gotta fulfill his destiny as a warrior.
Now it's obvious, I think, to those of you who have listened to any other of these programs, what Sri Krishna is talking about here. When I was talking to you about the Upanishads, I explained at several points the fundamental doctrine of the Hindus. And that is that the innermost reality of man is not quite what we who have been brought up in a Christian tradition call the soul. We have an inherited teaching, of course, of an immortal and individual soul, which is the root principle of every human being. But in the Hindu doctrines, the soul is not individual. The soul is supra-individual, or, as they would say in their technical language, the Atman, the soul or self. Self is really a better translation than soul. The Atman is identical with Brahman, and Brahman is the name which they use for the ultimate reality which underlies this whole universe. Now, I don't want you to think of Brahman as a sort of vast blob of perfectly transparent jello which penetrates the whole world. I think that's what many people imagine when they hear this kind of thing. The whole point of the Brahman idea is missed. When you form any image of it in your mind at all, even jello, even empty space or boundless light, Brahman is what we ourselves really are, what this whole universe is fundamentally and actually. There is no way of thinking about, of imagining that. For the very simple reason that as water cannot rise higher than its own level, thought cannot think what is higher than thinking. It cannot conceive the mind which thinks, and still less the power which generates the mind. Our symbols for, our ideas about this supreme reality are vaguish and voidish. Not at all because that reality is vague and void, but because thought and imagination are annihilated in trying to grasp it. The essential teaching which the Gita is trying to convey is that the real center and soul, the basic reality of you and I, is not the superficial consciousness which we ordinarily call myself. What we are fundamentally is this unthinkable source of life and existence named Brahman, the expansive. Nor must we confuse this unthinkable center of our lives with a sort of inert stuff, a so-called blind force. For one doesn't derive life and consciousness, feeling and reason from mere stuff, as if the dead were able to give birth to the living. You know, this notion of blind force as the ultimate reality, which has been popularized by a facile scientism, is merely the result of the fact that when the human mind gets out of its depth, it drowns and vomits up a lot of dead ideas.
Well, rightly or wrongly, it just strikes me that Brahman as a blind force is something that's, well, it's almost the equivalent, if not of a puppet master god. It's some kind of force that's stronger than our own free will, which propels all of us to experience these physical lives and worlds. The idea of Brahman, I think it's just a bit misconstrued, that's all. It got misconstrued back in the day, and someone was trying, by using the word Brahman, or the idea of Brahman, they were trying to say that there is only one kind of consciousness. There's only one kind of true consciousness, and that's perfect eternal conscious energy, or just for short, eternal consciousness. But it got misconstrued, you see. It got, somebody sort of misinterpreted it, or mistranslated it, or misedited it, so that it sort of translated as there's only one personality that is experiencing all these zillions of different lives and life forms in this particular physical world. There's only one personality that's experiencing all of this. And like I say, that's misconstrued. That's not what's meant to be said, or that's not what was meant to be conveyed. What was meant to be conveyed is there's not one personality, there's just one type or one kind of consciousness, and that's eternal consciousness. And eternal consciousness is in the form of infinite number of perfect spirits, of thinking, feeling entities who are aware of the fact that they are thinking, feeling entities. They are aware in their home state of awareness that they are perfectly equal and equally perfect to all other thinking, feeling awarenesses. They are all eternal awareness. They are eternal consciousness. They are eternal thinking, feeling entities. That means that they have always existed as thinking, feeling entities. They can't change, they can't improve, they can't diminish, they can't be harmed. Their eternal life cannot be taken away or suspended or nothing. You know, they're all equally perfect and perfectly equal. They can't be threatened, they can't be changed, they can't be harmed, they can't be spindled or mutilated or nothing. They can't be compelled, they can't be seduced, they can't be coerced, they can't be bullied. If you want to use an example, if virtually all the infinite spirits in reality attempted to gang up on just one spirit, they wouldn't be able to do anything to that one spirit, because there is only one kind of spirit, there's only one kind of consciousness, and that is perfect eternal conscious energy. But it expresses itself, as these individuals, and those individuals, as I say, are life itself. Each of them a thinking, feeling entity. So if you could from afar somehow observe perfect eternal conscious energy, it would look like, one consciousness. But if you could get up close, you would see that oneness is actually composed of infinite entities, all of whom are equally perfect and perfectly equal to one another. They can think whatever they want to think. They can feel whatever they want to feel. They can dream whatever they want to dream. They're never harmed or improved or diminished or changed by anything, ever, anywhere, ever. Be it in reality heaven or in a dream, they can never, ever be changed. So, anyways, that's what I think is going on with that whole Brahman trip. I think the original mushroom heads or cactus heads or whatever the hell psychedelics they were taking, a couple of thousand years ago there in India, they told the scribes, that there's only one kind of consciousness, and that's eternal consciousness. But every individual, every living creature that you see here, every physical creature, is the product and creation of its perfect spiritual self, of its perfect eternal conscious self. And there indeed is not some daddy-o God or just some one personality that's, because it's infinitely intelligent, managed to create an experience for itself where it gets to experience zillions of different lives, zillions of different personalities. That, the mushroom head would have said, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's only one kind of consciousness, that's eternal consciousness, and it is, if you will, it's composed of individual perfect eternal conscious thinking, feeling entities, each of whom is aware that it is a perfect eternal conscious entity, and it is amongst its equals. No one is older or younger, no one is more divine or less divine, no one is wiser or dumber. You understand? There's no hierarchy, there's no levels, there's no multi-dimensions, multi-realities, multi-levels, none of that. Reality heaven itself, just as perfect spirits, is the epitome of simplicity, fearlessness, and good news. But let's go on to the next track.
And so Sri Krishna goes on. He who knows that it is indestructible and eternal, uncreated and unchanging, how can such a person slay anyone, O Arjuna, or cause anyone to slay? Just as a person casts off worn-out garments and puts on others that are new, even so does the embodied soul cast off worn-out bodies and take on others that are new. Weapons do not cleave this self. Fire does not burn him. Waters do not make him wet, nor does the wind make him dry. He is uncleavable, he cannot be burned. He can neither be wetted nor dried. He is eternal, all-pervading, unchanging and immovable. He is the same forever. He is said to be manifest, unmanifest, unthinkable, and unchanging. Therefore, knowing him as such, thou shouldst not grieve. Even if thou thinkest that the self is perpetually born and perpetually dies, even then, O mighty armed, thou shouldst not grieve. For to the one that is born, death is certain, and certain is birth for the one that has died. Therefore, for what is unavoidable, thou shouldst not grieve.
So there's Krishna, man, describing perfect spirits, perfect eternal conscious energy. He's saying, perfect spirits don't change. They remain the same as they've ever been and ever will be. But what he does not go into is the fact that these spirits, he doesn't explain, number one, why these perfect spirits incarnate as temporary physical creatures in a temporary physical world. And he doesn't, go to the nth degree and say that these perfect spirits actually planned and scripted these temporary physical lives before the Big Bang. And then upon the Big Bang, it unleashes and unfolds and unfurls. But mankind calls it evolution and development. But it obviously was packed and planned. And so our lives indeed occur to us. Everything that we do or don't do is because it has occurred to us or it hasn't occurred to us in the here and now. And why should anything occur to you unless it had first been packed and planned? And it doesn't mention, Krishna doesn't mention that in order for perfect eternal conscious energy, in order for perfect spirits to experience this temporary physical world as if it's the only existence we've ever had or will have, the necessity for intentionally forgetting that we are perfect eternal conscious energy. Now, I'm sure in the back of my mind that some philosopher in the deep, dark, distant past mentioned that perfect spirits, it didn't use that phrase, but mentioned that perfect spirits needed amnesia, needed to forget their perfection in order to experience this illusory world. But I can't remember which ancient philosopher said that, and all I know is when I did research it many years ago, it did not lead to anything fruitful. It was not anything that had been followed up on or expanded, and there was no extrapolation. It was just simply sort of an offhand mention. But indeed, and so Krishna does a good job, describing perfect eternal conscious energy and describing the perfect spirits, but, fails to say why we spirits incarnate in this physical world, and fails to say that we all scripted these roles before the Big Bang, and fails to mention the necessity for amnesia, voluntary intentional amnesia, that is to say forgetting that we are perfect spirits, so that these temporary physical lives that we created before the Big Bang seem like the only lives we have ever had or will have. And I think we've done a smashing kick-ass job. We've definitely, as spirits, as perfect eternal conscious energy, have definitely accomplished what we intended. Because you have to admit, you have forgotten what you are. You have forgotten your perfect eternal conscious energy. You have forgotten that you scripted this existence of yours. And so it all just seems to be happening to you. Just seems to be some kind of random happening that just popped out of nothingness. And you will eventually indeed pop your clogs and fucking die into that same nothingness. Yeehaw.
Perhaps that last passage needs a little bit of interpretation. For to one that is born, death is certain, is a statement, of course, which is obvious enough. But not so obvious to us is, and certain is birth for the one that has died. I should try to explain this a little bit, because it's a passage expressive of what is called in India the doctrine of rebirth or reincarnation. If you will think for a moment of what you were before you were born, you will come to the rather puzzling conclusion that you, before you were born, are impossible to think about. Before you were conceived by your father and mother in the womb, you can't remember anything. You don't even remember darkness, not even a blank. Your background, your past history, right at its beginning, seems to be a state of complete annihilation of your ego, of your personality. And yet, oddly enough, here you are. After you die, you may presumably, go again into a state which we can imagine only as complete annihilation, of complete nothingness. And if so, you will, won't you, be in the same sort of condition as you were before you were born. You came out of that state, though. Should you be afraid to return to it?
I personally don't derive any comfort from that thought and what you just heard. It's not the epitome of simplicity, fearlessness, and good news for all. But the thing is, indeed, it's impossible for us to remember our home state of awareness, reality heaven. But as I said, cosmic consciousness informs us that it is, that is to say, reality heaven, our home state of awareness, it is the epitome of simplicity, fearlessness, and good news for everyone. It is the epitome of spiritual sanity and sobriety. It is formless, and it seems like oblivion to us humans because of the success of our intention to forget the truth of perfect eternal conscious energy, because of the success of our intentional spiritual amnesia. So this world, this temporary physical world and life, would seem like the only one we have ever had or will have. And you have to admit, we have pulled it off magnificently. But this idea that, he refers to the after-death experience as nothingness, when in fact it is reality heaven. It is our home state of awareness. But indeed, the fact that we cannot remember our home state of awareness, the fact that we cannot remember being perfect spirits before the Big Bang, before our existence here as humans, is just evidence of the magnificence of our infinite intelligence as perfect spirits, as perfect eternal conscious energy. Perfect eternal conscious energy is kick motherfucking ass. It gets what it fucking wants. And it wanted an experience, a life, where it has forgotten that it is perfect eternal conscious energy, where it has forgotten that it was the author of its current existence. And here we are. And it's very reminiscent of the line in A Course in Miracles, where Helen Schucman, because that's who wrote the fucking book, she mentions that we asked for the impossible. We are here in this dream because we asked for the impossible. And I remembered that, in the context of where that line can be found, it was sort of a damning, an indictment type of vibe to it. And I think that's wrong, Jack. We asked for the impossible. You would think that it would be impossible for perfect eternal conscious energy to forget itself, but it has not failed in its endeavor to do that, because here we are. That everyone would agree that this is a mysterious existence. Everyone would agree that they're not 100% certain about the answers to the four fundamental philosophical questions. First being, why am I alive as a temporary creature in a temporary world? How did this happen? Why did this happen? And then the second question is this world the result of a puppet master God? Is there a puppet master God that created all of us and is in control of everything? And if so, what are the qualities of this God? But if you answer that there is no God, can there still be life if there is no puppet master God? And then the third question is, what happens when we die? Do we really stop thinking and feeling forever and ever? Do we, as Alan says, return to nothingness? Because the idea that we return to nothingness and that we just suddenly appeared here out of nothingness without any spiritual intention or plan is preposterous, as you will come to realize. So, yeah, there you go, Jack. Perfect eternal conscious energy gets whatever it wants. It wanted what would seem to be impossible, to have an experience, to have a so-called life where it has forgotten itself and forgotten that it is the author of its existence. So we all walk around here uncertain of the answers to the fundamental questions. Question number 4 is this a free will, make it up as you go along kind of temporary existence, or has it been scripted before the Big Bang? And as you know full well, it bloody fucking well was scripted before the Big Bang, because somehow, some way, I can't explain why, but cosmic consciousness informs me that that simply there's not a single moment and not a single thing that could exist in this physical world if it had not been spiritually intended, consciously intended before the Big Bang. It's you might have to use hindsight, but with hindsight you cannot deny that this life has been unfolding and unfurling ever since the Big Bang. That nobody is making it up as we go along, and yet that is indeed, one of the experiences we wanted to have. That is to say that the majority common consensus opinion would be that, yes, you're making it up as you go along. There's no such thing as destiny. And you have to play by that game, at least appearance-wise, don't you? In your head, you don't have to play that game.
This is perhaps a rather elementary way of expressing the Hindu doctrine of rebirth, but I don't want to give the impression that the Hindu doctrine is, as it is imagined to be by many people in the West, a doctrine of the reappearance again and again in this life of an individual soul. I think it is true to say that according to the strict doctrine of the Vedanta, there is not an individual soul which passes from life to life. The one who transmigrates is precisely this Atman or Brahman, and this is why we have to imagine the state before birth and after death as blank annihilation. Because thought is annihilated in trying to grasp the reality which lies deeper than thinking. The finger that struggles to touch its own tip finds only the empty air.
Well, we have to consider that it's okay to update any aspect of any text, of any human thinking throughout the world. But at the time of the Bhagavad Gita, the idea was there was just this one individual consciousness experiencing itself subjectively as many different types of creatures. But that's, like I say, it's time to update that and point out that that's not the epitome of good news for everyone. The best news for everyone would be that indeed every individual so-called self or person that you, or living being that you see in this world is actually, a perfect spirit, an individual eternal consciousness that is perfectly equal and equally perfect to all other individual consciousnesses. None of them are higher or lower. None of them are older or younger. They have always existed. They were never created. They were never born. And you'll also note that the Bhagavad Gita does not talk about how we as individual eternal consciousness scripted these physical lives before the Big Bang. But like I say, it's all part of human consciousness, the evolution of human consciousness, and it's high time that we update it. And that's exactly what we're doing by speaking the words that we have spoken so far here on this recording. It's not sacrilegious. It's not wrong to fucking update things. I mean, it's amazing that they made it as clear as they did, in writing the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, goodness sakes, these I forget how old the Bhagavad Gita is, but it's very, very old. I'm pretty sure it's older than the Bible. But it doesn't matter. Like I say, I'm just amazed that they were able to word it as well as they did. But obviously, I think probably more for political reasons than anything. They didn't take it to the nth degree when talking about Brahman. They didn't, like I say, grasp fully that the answers to the fundamental philosophical questions absolutely and without equivocation have to measure up to the standard of being the epitome of simplicity, fearlessness, and good news for all.
And each caste has its proper duty in life, which in Sanskrit is svadharma. And this is the phrase which Krishna uses here when he says, having regard for thine own duty, for thine own svadharma. Sva, self, dharma, function. Or svadharma is probably best translated into English as vocation. The Kshatriya is one who has a vocation to fight. That's his job. Whereas a Brahmin, or more particularly, one who has gone beyond caste altogether, one who in India is called a sannyasin, corresponding in the medieval West to the monks and hermits. Those who have gone outside society, they do not have the vocation or the duty of fighting.
Well, like I've talked about in other videos about other religions, I think that all religions began because of opinions and ideas expressed by mushroom heads and cactus heads, people experimenting with psychedelics and who just had, a lifelong obsession with the fundamental philosophical, spiritual, and enlightenment questions. And those answers, those opinions, those conclusions would eventually become watered down and or misunderstood, miswritten, miscribed, misedited, mistranslated, misinterpreted, and ending up with what we have today of whatever is left of the Hindu religion, or of whatever is left of the Christian religion or the Jewish religion or any other religion. Like I say, I think all these things started out pure, so to speak. They were the product of cosmic consciousness, which was attained, like I say, not just by any old body, but by fucking philobabblists, by motherfuckers who, since they were children, obsessed with the fundamental philosophical questions of life. They were obsessed with solving the mystery of life. How the fuck did we get here? What the hell are we doing here? How did this happen? Why did this happen? What happens when we die? Do we really stand before the pearly gates? Do we stand before a judge? Do we go to hell? Do we go to heaven? Do we go to nothingness? And like I say, so these guys, they put forth their conclusions, their ideas, and then somehow it just, like Chinese whispers, it ends up getting all garbled. But this here little piece that you just heard about Dharma, that's the closest thing to predestiny that I've heard, at least with regards to the Bhagavad Gita. This or just the Hindu religion, but it's just this idea of dharma, this idea of sort of a predestined script predetermined before the Big Bang of what your caste was going to be and what your vocation was going to be, whether you were going to be a warrior or a scribe or a tradesman or this or that or whatever. But like I say, you don't hear any detail, do you? So lots of things got watered down, lots of things got glossed over. My guess is that originally Dharma was putting forth the idea that this has all been scripted beforehand, that that it's impossible for you not to live out your destined life. But it got watered down, and so you're left with this odd idea that you're born into this caste, or you're born with a vocation, a function, and but it doesn't explain why. You see, and I think originally, like I say, whatever Hindu is based on originally, which we'll never know because it's lost to the sands of time. But originally it was pure. It was talking about perfect eternal conscious energy. It was telling you that we're all perfect spirits, actually. That the perfect spirit that is being the fly at the moment, or the ant, or the palm tree, or the bat, or the frog, could have chosen to be a human, could have chosen to be any kind of human. Beautiful, ugly, smart, dumb, evil, nice, doesn't matter. That's what they would have told you. But it's okay. I mean, and you're not letting... Who knows? Maybe some people might have thought, hey, man, you're letting the cat out of the bag. Well, no, you're not. How can you be? I mean, if this is a spiritual movie, and one of the characters in the movie has the role of talking about how it's all a spiritual movie, well, there you go. It's still part of the film. And nobody is going to hear what I say or anyone says about perfect eternal conscious energy and suddenly be enlightened. Most of the people that are going to relate to what's being said have arrived there, through their own research and their own scrutiny over many, many fucking years. You dig? And so that's the groovy thing about philosophy, about philobabble, is you can listen to the same talks and or read the same books many times over many years. And each time you do, it gets a little bit clearer, a little bit sharper. At least your understanding becomes a little clearer, a little bit sharper of what's being said. But yeah, so there you go. I mean, it's perhaps a big leap of faith. Perhaps it's even considered sacrilegious. But as far as I'm concerned, Dharma originally was the idea that this has all been predestined, that this has all been scripted beforehand, and that it's impossible for you to live outside of your destiny or interfere or interrupt your destiny. Let's listen to the next clip. Yeah, well, this is just a little mention about timing, which I find is a very curious thing about this life, and I receive it and perceive it. I, the character, whoever, perceives it and receives it as evidence that this is a destined existence, that this has all been scripted before the Big Bang. The way that timing works. And I can only think of just a few examples, but I won't say where or when it happened. But when I was a very small child, we were at school, and we were all lined up to get some sort of injection. And I guess I didn't like the idea, so I was at the back of the line. And also at the back of the line was the girl that I thought of, although I never told anyone. But I thought of her as the horse-headed girl, because she seemed, just something about the shape of her face and her head and the way she wore her hair. It reminded me of a horse. So me and the horse-headed girl are at the back of the line, and I'm just, I'm looking ahead. I'm looking at what's going on at the front of the line, and it's not a normal injection. It's not a normal somebody holding a needle and just taking it and plunging it into your arm and squeezing the contents into your arm. Instead, it looks almost sort of like a microscope, and it looks like it's got two prongs. And I can't for the life of me remember how it was operated, how they used it, but I didn't like the look of it at all. I didn't like this thing that looked sort of like a staple gun or a microscope or something. It was just a very strange looking thing that had two prongs on it. And so somehow, it occurred to me all of a sudden to just bolt, to just run the fuck out of there. The thing was, it was taking place at the end of the day. At the end, all the classes were finished, and so this is what you had to do before you could leave the school. You had to get your fucking injection. And I noticed that, everyone, after they got their injection, was given a cotton ball, and they held the cotton ball over the area of the injection, and they, went away. Also, I will note that as I watched the people at the front of the line receiving their injections and so forth, there was a lot of laughter and so forth, but I just found it all very icky and horrible and frightening. And so all of a sudden I just bolted and bursted into tears as I go, running towards the exit. And I covered the area of my arm where I saw them getting their injection, and pretended like, I had a cotton ball or whatever there, and ran out of the fucking building and got into the car. My mom was waiting for me in the parking lot, and that was that. They didn't stop me. And it's also very interesting that you think they would have had a list, of names, and so that they could tick off each name of those who received their injection. But I never heard another fucking word about it, I don't know what it was fucking for, and I just trust that it was a good thing, that I did run the fuck away from it, given what we know nowadays about fucking vaccinations. And of course, as an adult, I've never ever gravitated to that bullshit about getting a flu shot or no, I don't trust humans. I don't know what the fuck they're going to be sticking into my bloodstream. My bloodstream's precious. If I want to fucking give it fucking nicotine and marijuana and alcohol and chocolate and processed sugar and whatever the fuck, that's down to me. But I simply don't believe what the humans have to say is in that fucking injection. I don't care. Too many times over the past 50 years, it's come out that, where they sold some idea, sold the idea, sold a drug or a vaccination, with, confidence. And then it turns out that, oh no, well, we made a mistake. So, yeah. But that's just one example of timing, in as much as you would think, in most cases, a child would not be able to run away from a vaccination. And at the very least, would have heard about something the next day or the day after, or the school would have contacted, my parents and said, little Alexander hasn't had his shot, hasn't had his jab, hasn't had the mark of the fucking beast, so you need to arrange for him to come down here and get it. Just in saying that, the microphone fell over. And then there's just the other things of timing. The other example I like to use is just how, every once in a while, over the past 18 years, just inexplicably, really. Well, it's not inexplicable. I'll be making the bed, and I just happen. I don't always look out the window that's right near the bed, but sometimes I look out the window, and out the window is a very busy street. And it's just remarkable how every once in a great while, I just happen to look out the window, and I don't make the bed at any certain time of the day or night, you know. By appearances, it would look random of when I make the fucking bed or when my wife makes the bed. But, I look out the window and suddenly there's someone that I know in a car. And they're pulled over to the side so that some other person can drive by. Because on these British roads, if anybody dare park on the fucking road, well then there can be no two-way flow of traffic. There can only be, at various portions of the road, only one-way flow. And you have to pull over and let somebody go by, or they pull over and let you go by. But yeah, every once in a while I happen to glance down, hey, there's somebody that I know that doesn't live anywhere in the area, And then another remarkable example of timing is what just happened the other day, man. I walk my dogs. I've got 2 dogs. I've got a Jack Russell and a Cavapoo. And there's 4 options for a walk. There's the short walk, there's the long walk, there's the very long walk, and then there's the very, very long walk. And most of the time, and certainly usually throughout the winter, and it's not until summertime really, we just stick to the short walk, which is a walk to the field and to a particular fence, and then we turn around and we come back home. Because to go any further, usually in the wintertime, it's terribly, terribly muddy. But the other day, it just all of a sudden occurred to me, let's go on the long walk. And so we're moseying along, going on our long walk. Now there comes a junction, a crossroads. We can go left, we can go forward and turn right, or we can turn right as soon as we come off the bridge. So if we turn right just before we come off, or just after we come off the bridge, then that takes us behind the rapeseed field. If we proceed forward and go to the road, then we will be walking in the same direction, but we will be walking in front of the rapeseed field. And the rapeseed at the moment is about 6 feet high. Well, it just, who knows why? Ha ha ha. But it occurred to me that, once we crossed the bridge, we just took the first right, and that's behind the rapeseed field. And I'm walking along, and all of a sudden I see up ahead it looks like a whole bunch of new trees have been planted. But also scattered amongst all these new trees that have been planted are these, are the contents of potted plants. So, you know what a potted plant looks like if you dump it out. All the roots have wrapped around and so forth. Well, someone dumped a whole bunch of those, which I thought was messy and inconsiderate. But, as we're getting closer, I think, wow, I recognize I recognize those stalks. I recognize that kind of stalk. And as we get closer and closer, it's like, oh yeah, so apparently some commercial marijuana grower, utilizing, who knows, a whole house or just one entire bedroom or whatever, has grown, about 50 fucking plants in what looked to be about, I don't know, 25-gallon containers or something. And they've chopped the plants from the base, for the most part, and they've left some debris behind. They've left some waste behind. They've left some portions of plant behind, and so I'm having a look through there, And I'm finding buds, man. I'm finding mature UK cheese buds. Gnarly, mature, stinky, skunky fucking buds that looked like they'd been out there for a few days. Not much longer than that. And so there's nobody around, although I don't look around completely to see if I'm being looked at, but I'm in the back of a fucking field. Anyways, I pick what fucking bud I find. I stick it in the poop bags that I had brought along with me, just in case the dogs poop, on the sidewalk or whatever. I have to pick it up. But these were empty, brand new, clean poop bags, so I just stuck all this bud in there, man. Brought it home, and I reckon I got just nearly about a ½ ounce of, like I say, truly kick-ass, fully mature UK cheese bud, because that seems to be the bud of choice amongst UK commercial marijuana growers. They grow the fucking cheese. So, wow, what a trip, you see. And the thing is, what happens the very next day? The very next day, it absolutely pisses with fucking rain, man. Not that would have ruined the plants. If I had found it the day after that downpour of rain, the buds still would have been salvageable. All you do is dry it the fuck out, I mean, when you're a pothead, you don't give a fuck about cosmetics. It's, the bottom line is, will this get me high or not? Yay or nay. I don't give a fuck what it looks like. So, there you go. Talk about timing. And it's, amazing that nobody else found it before me. I mean, because I found some fucking big fucking buds, Jack, that these guys were sloppy about. But I have to say, looking at what they threw away, they definitely knew what the fuck they were doing. They definitely know how to fucking grow bud. That's no question about that. But how stupid and chavvy and irresponsible to dump their waste like they did. They could have easily taken that somewhere to a composting site, or they could have just taken it a little bit further infield where there's this, ditch that they could have dumped it into. But, well. So, yeah, talk about timing. It's a trippy thing. And, the trippy thing about me finding that link to the Bhagavad Gita, I eventually, found the full text of the Bhagavad Gita and read it all, and thus concluding that it was just, it's just this pro-war sham, really. It's saying, hey baby man, you got a destiny to be a soldier, to be a killer, and ain't no spirit being actually killed by any of this, so do your job with gusto, motherfucker, or live a life of humiliation as a pussy who chickened out. That's what the Bhagavad Gita is saying, Jack. Hell yeah. But it's just amazing that it's not until now that I, as a philosopher, 55 years old, been a philosopher since 1970, it's not until I'm 55 that I read the Bhagavad Gita. And then shortly after, I find these fucking videos, these audio files of Alan Watts talking about the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, timing is a trippy thing, Jack. It's a very telling thing. But, you're not here really, as far as I can tell. It's impossible to accrue enough evidence for yourself, enough examples for yourself to absolutely and unequivocally prove that this is all a scripted dream. and therefore you simply utilize the tiniest little leap of faith that it is. You utilize the tiniest leap of faith that the very fact that it just seems too slippery and impossible to fully convince yourself that it's a dream, that there in fact proves that it's a dream. That fact that you can't prove it completely is intentional slipperiness to, keep the dream mysterious. So even though we talk about the fact that this is a dream, that this is a spiritual movie, it doesn't really break the immersion. It doesn't really free you from it, you understand? It certainly doesn't free you from whatever in your scheduled destiny. The destiny that you scheduled for yourself before the Big Bang. Anyways, groovy. Let's listen to the next clip.
It is through the realization that he is that eternal now, not his past, that Arjuna is able to act in a free way, in an unmotivated way, and thus go into battle, not because he is moved to fight by hate, by squeamishness or fear, but because he carries out his appointed place in a society in which it's his vocation to be a warrior. We may think it regrettable that societies exist in which there is a vocation to be a warrior, but let's not be sentimental in this respect also. Because every one of us is unable to live at all without killing something. Some of us would like to rule out altogether the killing of our fellow men. But you see, in the Hindu view of life, there isn't this rigid distinction between man on the one hand and animals and plants on the other, which exists for us in the West. Therefore, there are times in the Hindu view when killing is an unavoidable condition of being alive. And this is one of the problems which the Gita sets itself to solve. I've read these selections from the translation of the Bhagavad Gita, that's spelled Bhagavad -Gita, translated by Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, Radhakrishnan. As you may know, Dr. Radhakrishnan is the Vice President of India. The translation is published by Harper & Brothers of New York. It is one of the best of the many translations that I know, and is provided throughout with an excellent commentary.
So basically, Alan is summing up the Gita and pointing out how Krishna is using the concept of perfect eternal conscious energy and the fact that this is a dream world, a spiritual movie, where nothing real is being harmed or threatened in any way whatsoever, and that the only thing that is real is perfect eternal conscious energy, perfect eternal thinking, feeling entities who are aware that they are perfect eternal thinking, feeling entities amongst their equals. None of them is older or younger, none of them is wiser or dumber. And he goes on to point out that physical life here cannot exist without eating other living things or the dead bodies of living things, or otherwise the products of living things. And so, I think it's really interesting how he points out how the Hindu don't make any distinction. That sounds really ignorant, don't. That the Hindu religion doesn't make any distinction between plant life, insect life, animal life, and human life. And that's exactly the way it should be, really. Life is life is life. It's only egocentric, arrogant, stupid, fucking deeply immersed motherfucking human scientists and so forth that come up with this idea that consciousness can only exist because of a brain, or it can only exist via, like a human brain or something that resembles a human brain. But that's just a load of shite. Of course, you have to make a tiny leap of faith to understand why that's shite or how that's shite. But nonetheless, life is life is life, consciousness is consciousness is consciousness. And so just because insects can't build televisions and dogs can't build and drive cars and computers and so forth, it doesn't mean that they're lesser beings, But I think, you notice that there's these people called vegans and vegetarians, aren't there? And they seem to operate under the idea that potatoes and carrots and cucumber and bean sprouts, that these things are somehow not the product of perfect eternal conscious energy, that somehow these things are not perfect spirits, that these are not thinking, feeling entities, playing the part and living the life of a physical creature, that humans call a carrot or a pineapple or a pistachio nut, and so they don't feel so bad. Because apparently a potato, a tomato, a cucumber, a pineapple, a bean sprout, they don't have a face with eyes where you can see the so-called sentient being. So the vegans and the vegetarians apparently trip out about the fact that, the lamb, the pig, the cow, the chicken, the fish, these are sentient beings, they reckon, because they've got eyes and a brain and so forth. And indeed, you can make friends with any creature, really. But so because the potato and the lettuce and the carrot doesn't seem to have any kind of face, and therefore it fails the test of being a sentient being, then these vegans and vegetarians think it's okay. They think that they're not killing a living creature in order to feed themselves. And yet the consciousness, the spirit, the thinking, feeling entity that is being the carrot or the potato or the bean sprout could have been a human if it wanted to. Any kind of human. Smart, pretty, ugly, dumb, evil, holy, divine, whatever the fuck. This time around, that spirit chose to be a potato or a carrot. And you can well bet that you and I have probably chosen and will choose, or have chosen, for the future, to be many different forms. Because there's nothing better to do throughout eternity than to immerse ourselves in these dream worlds. And as I'm fond of saying, these dream worlds that we're living out were conceived before the Big Bang. So it's conceivable that some spirits only chose one incarnation in this particular physical universe. One, that's it. They just chose one incarnation. Who knows what that was, but that's what they chose. But it's also, easy to conceive and imagine that some spirits chose many, 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 many lives. Many, many, many incarnations. If you just pull a number out of your ass, like 1 trillion years, and say that this physical universe will exist for 1 trillion years and then it will exist no more, well, as I say, anything that happens within that 1 trillion years had to have been planned and scripted before the Big Bang. And so it's certainly conceivable that we have chosen to be many different forms throughout that 1 trillion years. And it's just a evidence of our magnificence as perfect eternal conscious energy that we do not remember those other incarnations, and we do not have a clue of what those future incarnations are going to be, because it's all been planned. Anything and everything that happens in this physical universe, in the life of this physical universe, had to have been planned before the Big Bang. That's just the way it goes. I don't know why. I feel on the verge of knowing why, and so we shall see as time goes by if that develops or not. But, so yeah, there you go, the Bhagavad Gita. Alan Watts talking about it, reading from it, pointing you to what he thought was a very good translation of it, along with, he thought, good commentary as well. I haven't looked at that book that he mentions, but perhaps someday I will. And let me hit the pause button for just 1 second. Don't trip out. I will be back. Well, I would just say that make note of the fact that Alan talks about, in that last clip that we heard, he talks about carrying out his appointed place in a society where his vocation is as a warrior. But carrying out his appointed place. Appointed. Appointed is something that happens before the fact. Eh? That's a little kitty cat jumping down from the shelf. Hello, Bubbles. But appointed means something that happens before the fact, before the event, before the action, before the occurrence. So, so there you go, the Bhagavad Gita. It's really just that one element, but as Alan points out, and as is apparent, it's quite simply just Krishna talking to some dude who wants to chicken out from fulfilling his role and destiny as a warrior, who unfortunately is required to, in this case, go to battle with his uncles and his cousins. I don't know why. I guess I'm sure there must be some backstory as to why this guy, is on the opposite side of his uncles and cousins and so forth. But it's just basically Krishna using the idea of perfect eternal conscious energy, using the idea that this is just a dream and all the performers and players are just they're actually perfect spirits. No harm is coming to them no matter what the appearance to the contrary is. Whether it looks like they're being killed or destroyed or no. And he's telling this guy this so that this guy will indeed fulfill his destiny, so that he will go to war, because it says in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna goes on to tell Arjuna that you don't want to disgrace yourself and your family and friends by being a pussy. It's basically what it says. Says, yeah, okay, sure, you spare their lives, so to speak, and spare yourself being killed in battle, but will you be able to live with yourself for the rest of your life with that kind of shame, with knowing that people are talking about you, talking bad about you, and so forth? So it's just a whole browbeaten exercise to get this guy to go to war. Really, But the reason why we're talking about it here at the Alan Newport Show, and the reason why Alan was talking about it, is because there's that gem there, that description of which, I rephrase as perfect eternal conscious energy. Where it's putting forth the idea that this is, just a dream, and that nothing real is being threatened, and that the only thing that is real are perfect spirits, and perfect spirits are perfect thinking, feeling entities who have always been alive and have nothing better to do than to script out these dream lives and then live them out in the flesh. And in order for each dream life to seem like it's the only life they've ever had or will have, they had to intentionally forget that they're perfect eternal conscious energy. They had to intentionally forget that they were the author of their experience, of their dream story, their dream life, their biography here in this world. All been scripted and thought out to the tiniest detail before the Big Bang. That's right. Anyways, well, it's been groovy listening to this. I hope I can boost the sound level of the Alan Watts files here so that you're able to hear them without needing headphones. This has been the Alan Newport Show. I've been your host, Alexander T. Newport, your philobabulous extraordinaire, also known as Philosopher Newport. And it has been the 11th of May, 2019, and we're just gonna groove along, finish up here, and say, be cool, fool.